session, last session of this great conference. To the Irish participants, I would like to say Kate Mila Falce to this conference, which means, and that is wonderful, I think, which means 100,000 welcomes. So to all of you, 100,000 welcomes to this last panel of this great conference. And that is indeed bad news. It's our last activity together. But the good news is that we have a top class panel together. We have some real top class people here with us, and we will discuss with them the more policy angle of all this. We will explore what role policymakers could play at European level and also maybe at other levels. And I would like to start by sharing a bit of good news with you. This morning, parallel with this conference, the Disability High Level Group is taking place. And the Disability High Level Group is the platform where all the member states come together with the Commission and the Commission services and discuss the new disability strategy, that will become effective from 21 to 2030. And that is a very important debate that is going on. And I informed all these colleagues that we are having this conference now here today, and the director of DG Employment confirmed that she sees a very important role for in that disability strategy to indeed facilitate access to cultural participation and taking part in the cultural life. So that is, I think, something very, very positive. For the speakers, I have to remind them that you should respect the time allocated to you. We have indeed 6 speakers, and you all should respect the time allocated to you. I don't like stopping people, but I will do that if needed. And I would like to start by giving the floor to the House of the People, the European Parliament. And we have an MEP here with us, Monica Semedo from Luxembourg. She was a TV presenter and since a while also member of the European Parliament. She's a member of the Renew group and a full member of the Committee of Employment and Social Affairs, and also active in the Education and Culture group. So the right person, I think, to open this debate with. Monica, could you please share with us a few ideas, a few thoughts on what Europe can do to facilitate cultural participation of persons with support needs, persons with disabilities? What can the European Union do? What should the Commission do? What can the Parliament do? Monica, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Luc, and hello to all the participants and the colleagues that are talking. Yes, globally for me, inclusion means diversity in all senses. It means equality, and equality means, to me and also to my group, Renew Europe, equal access. Means equal access for everyone to art world, equal access and chances for developing their talents and getting the opportunity to show one's talents. And it's, of course, for people with disabilities, it's important to have access to the facilities. That's the first point, but also access to classes, workshops where they can get to know and develop their talent. Also access to ateliers in order to really being able to paint, for example. I think that's very important. So it should be a political priority for all EU institutions. I want an inclusive Europe, an inclusive European Union, where everybody has the same equal chances and opportunities. And I take that very serious. So it's about people with disabilities, but it's also a gender issue. For example, if you talk about art in its broader sense, and also disadvantaged people or people with a disadvantaged background. Everybody should have access to art, and we politicians on European level, but also on national levels, we should strive for that. So inclusiveness means equality, diversity, and also more visibility. For example, just to be short, in Luxembourg, there is this project, Black Arts Matter. So where Black artists are highlighted. And this could be done also for people with disabilities, like we saw in the video. Great pieces he produced. So also giving them the platform and the visibility, and their politicians or politics can do a lot. For me, art is universal.
Can I ask you, Monica, do you see concrete actions that you could take in the European Parliament, maybe in the Committee on Education and Culture? Do you see concrete hooks there that we could use?
Yes, I'm the shadow rapporteur for Renew on Creative Europe. So one of the biggest funds for arts and culture. And it includes the issue of accessibility, although from the side of the Parliament, from the side of the representatives of EU citizens. But the Council and Commission don't see it as such a priority. Mm-hmm. So they should, and we should, and we will do pressure on that, put pressure on that. Perfect. Because it's important. Also, for example, Erasmus+, it's important that people exchange and everybody can exchange. So these are one of the main priorities. And you mentioned it before, the review of the disability strategy is really crucial and important. Yeah. And I support and I introduce in each file I'm working on and take into consideration people with disabilities and to have a more inclusive European society.
Great, thank you very much for this very clear message, and thank you for being with us. I also would like to point out that the European Parliamentary Research Service launched a very interesting report, Access to Cultural Life for People with Disabilities. And in that report, indeed, the researchers referred to European Union funded projects. And 2 of the 4 projects they referred to are indeed projects developed by ESPD, by the network of services that we represent. Thank you for your support, and I'm sure that we will meet again in the Parliament and try to join forces to advance this agenda. And I'm sure that the next speaker, Ben Evans, will fuel this debate because Ben Evans drafted a report on disabled artists in the mainstream and how we can advance this agenda. Ben, please introduce that report and your thoughts to this audience. You have the floor, Ben.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I'm going to make a start straight away because of my, so that I do the time properly. Yes, as you said, my name is Ben Evans, and although I work for the British Council as the head of Arts and Disability, and although I am the project director of a large-scale cooperation project supported by the Creative Europe programme of the European Union called Europe Beyond Access, which focuses on mainstream organisations and disabled artists, I'm actually talking today as my, with a hat on as interim coordinator of the European Arts and Disability Cluster. And I'll explain what that is and why that's important. And I'm going to talk to you about a report that has come out of that cluster. But I think before I say that, I just wanted to note what we heard yesterday from Barbara Gessler, and then today from Pedro Velázquez Hernández, you know, the fact that Creative Europe's successor programme, which will last from 2021 to 2027, is currently being finalised. So it feels to me as though we have 8 weeks to influence the next 8 years of cultural funding in the EU, and 8 weeks to prevent the marginalisation of disabled people in culture. So it's such a brilliant thing that you're having this conference now. I wanted to introduce the report by just saying who the Arts and Disability Cluster are. These are actually the cluster is of transnational projects focusing on arts and disability from a mainstream cultural organisation perspective. It does represent 9 projects with current or recent Creative Europe funding, 4 projects with Erasmus Plus funding, and also a series of other transnational projects with funding which is either from private organisations or from funders like Arts Council Ireland and other national funders. I'm one of the authors of the report, along with Filip Pawlak, a disabled artist and producer from Poland, and a researcher and journalist, Bettina Panellist from Greece. The report quite simply makes one recommendation for cultural policy across Europe, and then 6 proposals for the future European Union regarding funding programs and funding instruments. So I'm just going to talk through those because I hope that it will be food for discussion in a moment. We said one recommendation for European cultural policy, and we've said in particular as audiences, but also as well as artists, and I'll come on to why that's so important. And this is a recommendation for a cultural policy in European Union institutions, but also for member states. And in short, have one. It's really simple that you can't undo decades and generations of marginalization without having a very clear and articulated strategy. So it really is important to have a definite and specific cultural policy on how to reverse the cultural marginalization of disabled people. So we've said that we want the European Union and its institutions to develop a cultural policy aimed at the full cultural participation of disabled people as audiences, as artists, and as arts professionals. And I focus here on a cultural policy. I think the discussion that you've been having, Luke, about the disability strategy is fantastic. The way that we are approaching it as the cluster is looking at the cultural policy. We think this is a cultural question as well as a disability question. And there are 4 policy areas within this policy that we believe should be developed. 1, raising awareness of the challenges and marginalization of disabled people at national and EU level. The EU institutions have a unique role in communicating the appalling record for disabled people's participation in the arts. So for example, in the UK, 2% of cultural workers are disabled, although 19% of the population are disabled. So it's an amazing opportunity there to raise awareness. 2, articulating that the significant proportion of the EU population who are disabled have an equal right to benefit from public expenditure on cultural activities. I know this is possibly seen as a very British way of thinking about it, but I think actually having an equal right to that cultural expenditure feels incredibly important. Demanding equal access to cultural mobility for disabled arts professionals. And we say this because I think there's some very strong policies around disabled people's engagement as participants, as social cohesion, but we're talking here about disabled arts professionals, and I'd be delighted to have further conversations about the unique contribution of disabled artists to current art forms. And 4th, reducing discriminatory barriers for audiences and building new audiences of disabled people. There is so little research done to show the limited opportunities disabled have to engage with the cultural sector. So those are the 4 policy areas, but I'm also briefly going to just identify the 6 proposals we have for EU cultural initiatives and funding instruments. And I'd be really delighted to hear from colleagues, including Pedro Velázquez Hernández, what your thoughts might be on these. We feel that the successor programme to Creative Europe should note in the aims of the overall programme and in the aims of each annual programme that it is actively seeking applications which support the greater engagement of disabled professionals. If the door's been closed to you for 40 years, you stop trying to open it. So it needs to be explicitly said that this is one of the aims. 2, Creative Europe should adopt a separate and specific priority targeted at the work of disabled artists and cultural operators, not just as audiences or within the context of social inclusion. The reason it's important for this to be a priority is that applications are judged against the priorities. So unless it's there, you won't get the applications. 3, Creative Europe successor programs should adopt a number of practical measures within the application process designed to encourage greater participation and leadership within the program of disabled artists and cultural operators. I was really delighted to hear some of the presentations from Erasmus+, who those of us working in the cultural field might find their infrastructures much easier to include things like access costs. And it prompts you with that, which is helpful for everyone. Creative Europe needs to adopt some of those. 4, for all projects, Creative Europe successor programs should include specific budget lines to meet the costs that reduce barriers. It's not only a way for us as projects interested in working with disabled artists to meet those access costs, but it prompts other organisations who've never thought about working with disabled artists to think, oh, maybe I do need to budget for a sign language interpreter, things like that. Experience from national institutions shows us this changes the cultural sector. 5, and I'm nearly finished. 5, we need to ensure that the successor programme has access budget lines which are not considered part of the total budget.
You have 1 more minute, Ben.
Well, thank you. Lisette Reuter referred to this yesterday, the fact that in a €200,000 project, if 50,000 is spent on access, you've reduced your artistic spend by a quarter. There needs to be a separate budget line. And finally, that Creative Europe should develop a dedicated funding mechanism to support the cultural engagement of audiences with access needs. I will explain, if asked, who we have approached and the information. I know we've spoken with your colleague as the cultural rapporteur in the European Parliament, but I'll post some links into the chat if people are interested. Sorry if I went over time.
No, Ben, you did, time-wise, you did perfect. And not only time-wise, also with regard to the content of your contribution, it was top. I think you provided a sort of an agenda for all of us to work on in the years to come, and also some very concrete advice to the European institutions. And indeed, you referred to the chat box where you provide material and links. Also, the SPD staff is providing links to important documents, strategies, information sources to all of you in the chat box. So please, dear participants, you can benefit from what is posted in the chat box if you want to have more information on some of the elements that we are discussing here. Let's now turn to Mr. Pedro Velasquez, who is the Deputy Head of Unit of Creative Europe at the European Commission. And I'm sure that you want to share with us, Pedro, if I can say Pedro, that you want to share with us a few thoughts, remarks, maybe also a bit of commitment on what was discussed so far and introduced by Ben. Pedro, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, with pleasure. But let me start with thanking the organizers for the inspiring video we had at the beginning of this session. It's really something that reminds us of the value of meeting together in person and not just virtually. We all miss that human contact. Also the conference folders and the goodies. We miss everything of a real conference. Let me start with a quote that I heard a few days ago in one event. That was someone saying, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. Actually, at the beginning, I was quite okay with that quote, but I believe the real quote should be different. Should be diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being able to enjoy the party and even to be organizer of the party. And this is something that the Commission is addressing recently. There was last week a strategy about how to make the European Commission more diverse in terms of staff. And I believe that all this should be the same in all institutions. I think that there is a dramatic lack of representation of minorities in those that are developing policies and implementing actions. I believe we had, I had the best presentation I could have before my intervention, because really I was reading with a lot of attention this European Beyond Access Disabled Artists in the Mainstream report and the 6 proposal. But before that, let me also confirm that indeed there is an important exercise now in view of defining the disability strategy in 2021 for the whole Commission. A strategy that goes in that direction of being able to enjoy the party and to be organizers of the party, which is to ensure that persons with disability can enjoy their rights and participate fully in society. It's about, my predecessor said, it's about not just being audience, but being artists, if we refer to the artist word. Being also culture professionals, because do not forget that our program, our policy address not only the artists, but the culture professions in general, or the whole culture and creative sectors. And we would like to see, of course, those sectors more open and more inclusive. This have been said, this disability strategy is, of course, gathering input from all relevant stakeholders, but from our side, from culture policy, we are also invited to the inter-service internal meetings where we can put forward all the aspects related more specifically to the cultural and creative sectors. And I'm sure that my colleagues from education are doing the same. So this is an engaging exercise that requires the input of all of us. Within the Future Creative Europe program I presented in the previous workshop with more detail, there are a broad variety of projects that have tackled this topic since 2014. Well, we have just seen one excellent example of this type of project. And of course, the Future program foresees to forces inclusion as a major aspect of its objective. And in this sense, it's important to refer that the budget of the program will be a bit bigger, not amazingly bigger. This is not what we ambitioned when we started working on the Future program, but actually seeing around us what is the situation, to have a budget increase of 33% is important. We cannot neglect this increase. It's never enough, but like any budget, there's no budget that would be enough by definition. We will work with these resources we have, with this budget, to do our best to have a program more inclusive than the current one. And this is why social inclusion in general is embedded in the objectives of the program and in the priorities. And now that we are defining the guidelines of the European cooperation projects for next year, social inclusion, I can assure that will be very prominent as an objective and as a priority for projects. Now, I've heard the presentation just before me. I have read with a lot of attention the 6 recommendations that are very, very thoroughly described in this excellent paper. I must say that they all make a lot of sense, and some of them are already addressed by the current legal base and the future guidelines. So I cannot go in details to all of them, but for instance, it is important that in the next generation of cooperation projects, there will be a higher co-financing rate. So we hope to be able to reach 80% for small cooperation projects. Of course, whatever I say, it depends on the final decision of the co-legislators that are now negotiating the program, and of course the all internal procedures. But our intention
is
is
that okay
to.
for you? 1 more minute.
Yeah. I'm finalizing.
Okay.
So our intention is really to include this this recommendation. And regarding the other recommendations, they are recommendations that are more difficult than others. They all make sense. It's difficult to have separate priorities specifically for these people with disability or special needs, because we'll have to do the same for a lot of different minorities. But of course, there is a way of addressing that, and I'm sure we can do it. And the most important thing, that is something that really I commit to address internally, is the fact of being actors of the play and not just audience of the play. Thank you very much. I stay with that and remain at your disposal.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for that clear commitment, and also for sharing your thoughts, and for bringing the good news that indeed you're looking into increasing the funding at the European site and reducing the own contribution of the partnerships. It is very important and good news for all of us. And I also would like to thank you for that nice metaphor. It is indeed about not only being invited to the party, not even being invited to dance, but also to organize the party. And I can assure you, indeed, it takes two to tango. Well, my organization, I'm sure the organization of the person that will speak next, and the cultural sector are available to start a tango and to organize a party. And that is my introduction to the next speaker, Pat Clark, who is Vice President of EDF, the European Disability Forum. And as you know, Pat, ESPD tries to live by the motto, nothing about persons with a disability without having persons with a disability on stage. So on behalf of EDF, Pat, you have the floor.
Thank you indeed, Luke. And yes, indeed, EDF has and ESPD have tangoed on a number of occasions in the past. Thank you to all the speakers for setting the scene. It has now been set very well. And I think what I have to say will support all of this. But firstly, a little bit about the European Disability Forum, for those who may not be familiar with it. EDF is an umbrella organisation of persons with disabilities that defends the rights of 100 million citizens, persons with disabilities in Europe. It is an independent NGO that brings together representative organisations of persons with disabilities from across Europe. It is run by persons with disabilities and their families, and it is the strong, united voice of persons with disabilities in Europe. And its main aim is the full implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities through the meaningful involvement of persons with disabilities in EU policy making. So, as you know, the UN Convention has been ratified by the EU and by all its member states. So according to Article 30, states parties are bound to recognise the right of persons with disabilities to take part on an equal basis with others in cultural life. More particularly and essentially, they must ensure that persons with disabilities enjoy access to cultural materials in accessible formats, enjoy equal access to television programmes, films, theatres, and other cultural activities, and enjoy access to places of culture, cultural performances or services, such as theatres, museums, etc. And as far as possible, enjoy access to monuments and sites of national and cultural importance. Equally important, the Convention also obliges states parties to take appropriate measures to enable persons with disabilities to develop their own artistic and creative potential. So I would ask, what has been the contribution from the EU to this matter, and what more can it be done in the near future? And I emphasise the near future. And giving you another anecdote, Luke, the best time to plant a tree would have been 40 years ago, as Ben has mentioned. The next best time is now. So let us make sure that we're not waiting another 20 years to make any progress in this matter. So on the one hand, in the past years, the EU has developed comprehensive legal framework for accessibility to the digital world. The Web Accessibility Directive, aiming at ensuring accessibility of websites and mobile apps on the public sector, will increase the accessibility of cultural bodies such as museums, theatres, etc. The Accessibility Act will also impact the digital accessibility of private sector cultural centres. And it will be up to member states to go beyond the digital domain and set out further accessibility requirements. And lastly, the updated Audiovisual Media Services Directive ensures that all audiovisual broadcasters' video-on-demand platforms will increase over time the accessible content such as films, TV series and programmes. Obviously, in order for these legislations to succeed, we need to make sure that the EU countries and member states transpose and implement these legislations in an adequate and timely and appropriate manner. On the other hand, the EU could do much more to support the implementation of the Article 30 of the UN Convention. Well, how, you might ask? Well, this can be achieved through the use of EU funding programmes such as the European Social Plus programme and, more relevant to today's discussion, the Creative Europe programme. Both of them should have a clear prerequisite of respecting accessibility to funding projects at national level. For example, under the Creative Europe programme, we cannot accept to provide funding for a film which does not even include subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing or audio description for people who are blind or partially sighted. Arts, culture, and can be powerful means for inclusion. And this is why all the projects funded by Creative Europe should also facilitate reasonable accommodation of artists with disabilities to take part in EU-funded artistic and cultural initiatives, regardless of whether the projects are primarily addressing the inclusion of persons with disabilities or not. And finally, I would like to see funded artistic projects in which persons with disabilities are portrayed as fully self-determined, multifaceted human beings with virtues and defects like everybody else, and to avoid approaches to disabilities which are unrealistic and based on compassion or exaggeration. I would like to just refer to one paragraph of Ben's report, which was saying that the European cultural offer underserves disabled people in the who make up a significant portion of the population, and there needs to be dedicated actions currently needed to correct historical cultural exclusion. We live in a diverse society, and therefore art and culture should reflect this and respect this diversity accordingly. We also would like to ensure that cultural and artistic...
One more minute, Pat.
Thank you. And I'm just finishing up. Managed by different EU bodies, such as, for example, the website Europeana, on the Europe's cultural and heritage or museums, such as the Parliamentarium, that they live up to the accessibility standards and reflect the diversity within our society. Thank you, Luke. Thank you all.
Thank you very much for your very clear and to the point contribution, Pat. And as you know, indeed, we did a bit of dancing already, ESPD and EDF, and I think the more we dance together, the more artistic it will become. Thank you very much for your contribution. And at this point, I also would like to say to the audience that all the presentations and all the texts will be made available through the different channels we have as ESPD. From EDF, we would like to go now to the global network on accessible arts and culture. And we have the founder of that network here with us, Kirsi. It's a small jump from Ireland to Finland, but Kirsi, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can you see me? Because I can't see anything, but it's okay.
We can hear you perfectly, but we don't see you at the moment.
Yeah, I don't have even any possibility to use camera to do anything.
Okay, but then please just, we can hear you loud and clear, so
Okay,
please.
now I got some place how to open it. Yes,
Okay,
hello
there you
everyone.
are. Okay, good, good, good.
Thanks for inviting me here today also. It's amazing possibility to be here. And I am Kirsi Mustalahti from Tampere, Finland. And today I will talk with three voices. I will introduce you ACCAC Finland, ACCAC Global, and also what I'm doing here in Tampere, Region 26 European Capital of Culture team. My personal mission to develop international cooperation, diversity and accessible services through culture and art began 13 years ago when I realized that our mind combined with a lack of knowledge is the biggest disability that I could imagine. And what I mean by that is attitude. How difficult it is to face new ideas, new persons from different cultures, or just anything you don't exactly know. As a manager and actor in independent professional theatre group, developing a theatre form that uses Finnish sign language and spoken language together, equal foot on the stage, we were not accepted to our public theatres. Why? Because we got the stamp disability art. And I started to figure out how to change the mindset, what to do to make the change happen. Okay, we were happy to perform a lot in different disability day activity centers or special schools for any kind of disabled people. So it came to my mind that maybe we need a global platform to do the change so that everyone would be equally welcome to present their art. I established ACCAC Accessible Art and Culture Finland in Tampere with the goal of providing events, culture service providers, organizations, theaters and companies with a concrete assistance to improve their accessibility and reach new audiences and participants. We wanted to change the atmosphere in Finnish culture and event field and enable equal participation in culture and events for everyone. So in ACCAC Finland, we developed a festival concept and organized the first ACCAC festivals 2013, 15, 16, 17, 18 here in Tampere and Finland. And we have also organized accessible and diverse events in South Korea, Nepal, Egypt, and ACCAC Showcase in Asia. So many kind of activities with different nationalities. And we are active partner in many European projects, developing network, sharing good practices, and producing innovative art. 2016, I established ACCAC Global to be the umbrella organization for the growing international activities. And today, our global community and network is active in 10 countries through our member organizations in Korea, Japan, Nepal, Morocco, Algeria, Cameroon, Tanzania, Croatia, and France, and more is coming. So the need for that is enormous. And those our ACCACs, they work towards diversity and social inclusion in their local area, like we do in Finland. They try to catch the policymakers and to make people visible. And when they are active, the global community is supporting them by good examples and good artists and that kind of way. Locally, we cooperate here with national disability and culture organizations and organize accessibility mapping for culture and event providers, as well as educate festivals for services for all participants. And we have also in global side few Erasmus projects, but one very special pilot project with the support of our Ministry of Education and Culture. It's everyone's festival. and it's unique. And it addresses the issues of achieving inclusion and equality at festivals, also for the performers. The aim is to expand the repertoire at festivals, make festival organizers aware of the possible special needs, and help them to take care the needs in practice. Also, it means accessibility in the backstage, but services is important.
1 more minute, is that okay?
Yes, and now I'm working here in Tampere city. I started in the beginning of August when Tampere is applying for the Culture Capital of Europe 26. And the whole title of our application is that we want to introduce to Europe a cultural project especially pendient to the future, grounded in equality and the key driver for social change. So equality and diversity and social inclusion is the most important value in our application. And my role in the project is to look at accessibility, social inclusion, equality in all points of view of the project from 21 to 26 to 32. How will we concretely build the project tools and also evaluate it? Because that's important. How will we ensure that the program reaches the same standard and quality and access to equality comes true? So please also, we will need you to build that amazing, huge project. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your contribution, Kirsi. Thanks for introducing the work of your organization, your network, and I wish you all the best with your advocacy work for the cultural capital. There is a request in the chat box, Kirsi, if people, if you want people to contact you, then please provide your email address in the chat box. Let's now turn to Owen Nash. Owen Nash is not only the key person in organizing this conference, is also the chair of the ESPD's member forum on arts and culture, and he is a manager of arts and creative arts therapies at the Cope Foundation. Owen, what should we do to advance this agenda? You have the floor.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for having me, and thanks to all the speakers. First of all, I'm coming to this with a very positive attitude, so I want to say that at the beginning. I'm involved in this work for over 24 years now, advocating, working with artists with disabilities. I was a professional trombone player and conductor myself, and as a result of nerve damage, I had to change my career path, and that way of working changed for me. So just to put myself in context there as well. As I said, I'm coming at this with a very hopeful attitude. In working in the area for such a long period of time, I want to start by saying the cogs in the wheels are turning. There is change occurring, and the allies internationally, locally, nationally, and internationally are galvanizing. And I do believe people are listening. Pedro is here today from Creative Europe, and he's listening to what we have to say. It seems that there will be a bigger budget, and from what Barbara was saying yesterday at the funding workshop, we are hearing that there will be a bigger emphasis on social inclusion and a bigger budget. However, in saying that, it's also important for me to say that often the disability movement gets lost in the social inclusion bigger strands. And that's why I think Ben specifically says about targets and statements that specifically talk to disability. So I feel I need to say that to Pedro at the beginning, and we need allies who are at your level, Pedro, at Barbara's level, and who are in positions to represent that disability movement on our behalf, because we are not there. Again, with Creative Europe and Erasmus+, we are seeing movements to increase funding and to support persons with disabilities in their funding mechanisms. In our own organisations, again, and this is why it gives me hope, the EASPD, moving from an interest group in arts and culture, are now moving to having a structured EASPD forum with a budget moving forward. I think this is, again, something at a structural level where we're beginning to see change. In the organisation I work with at Cope Foundation, there was no Department of Arts 24 years ago. There was many people working through arts, with arts, but there was no structure. Now there is a department with staff and with a budget. Kate O'Reilly, yesterday we hear directly from the artists, projects we're working directly with artists with disabilities. We're hearing that they are hopeful. And when we think about the disability activism in the 60s, where have we come from there? The wheels are turning. Simon McKeown recently became the first professor of art with Teesside Universities as a disabled artist, and now leading the way in higher education in art with a specific interest in arts and disability. So the wheels are changing, and we need the democratic renewal that is happening to be representative, and it needs to include persons with disabilities. On to my recommendations in relation to culture, the Creative Europe programme. The first thing to say—
1 more minute, Owen.
The first thing to say is, let's back Ben's procedures and protocols and report that he said. It's all there in detail. Our raising awareness in cultural sectors is key. There is not enough awareness of disability issues, and training on the UNCRPD must be improved. Cultural organisations applying for EU funds should be in receipt of disability equality training. There is not enough training there. Applications to Creative Europe included in section disability inclusion and support for the same around training is essential. The voices of culture, these structured dialogues that are supported by the Commission, have talked about different topics, but have not yet, these structured dialogues have not had a specific discussion on disability. And we need to maintain a vibrant and open dialogue with Britain as it moves out of the EU, because we do see, of course, there are some leaders in this area, and we need cultural awareness for the gatekeepers, the curators of work, to be aware of the work of disabled artists. In relation to disability services, I want to acknowledge that there are different points of services are at different points of development on this topic, and we need to recognize that. We are not all in the same position. We are coming from different positions, and services are working to provide the best they can do with little resources for the arts. So we recommend that in service provider organizations, policy to acknowledge Article 30 and have it embedded within services alongside other mainstream what are considered big policies. We need policies that are enabling and empowering, and to a process that can be delivered by services. We need training of staff and management and awareness around Article 30, because it is under-invested in, under-resourced and misunderstood. And we need to reach out and cooperate with disabled artists and artist groups to learn from each other. A final point, education has been repeatedly mentioned again over the final days, and we want to thank Erasmus Plus for the work that they are doing. But again, there are significant gaps in policy on admissions for learners with disabilities so that they can move into education to professionalise. This needs to be addressed by higher education and
you
further
conclude, Owen?
we need training, and we need to be able to finance that so that we can support people to lead into professionalising their educational opportunities. That's it. Sorry, Luke, 30 seconds over, but I have to make my points. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Owen. The 30 seconds over is in fact not a problem at all. And I would like to apologize to all panelists here. We should have planned a longer session because the discussion here is so rich, the input is so rich of all of you. So sorry for not having more time to discuss. I had a little question on my list here, but I'm afraid that we have no time for that anymore. I wanted to ask you all, what would be the major game changer? What would make a real start in bringing change? But we will discuss that at other occasions when we will meet again. And for sure, we will meet again, because as said by Pedro, let's organize this party together. Co-production is absolutely essential. The different actors should reach out to one another, have structural relations, develop structural relations, and we should take it from there and building a more inclusive culture and arts world accessible to all, not only as consumers, also as producers and as those that take leading roles in different aspects and ways. So I would like to thank all panelists for their very, very useful contributions. It was, I think, a very rich, a fantastic debate that we have had. And it is not the end of something, it is the beginning of a process, a new area where also ESPD will work on with its members and its colleagues in EDF and in other organizations.